Welcome to episode 3 of the FD podcast. And today we're on a little bit of a different track. We've done podcasts in the past where we talk about health and fitness mindset, and where practically you can, in my opinion, overcome a lot of hurdles neurologically as well with health, fitness, mindset. But what we've never told you is how hard it is and the struggle behind certain neurodivergent qualities. Qualifying that in the sense of there is often a dark side no one talks about. And there's no one better than a good friend of mine, Kirsty, who has been on plan. She's been with the team for years and who's able to speak about it. So welcome, Kirsty.
Hi, thanks for having me.
What I'd like to touch upon first is an area we haven't before and which we just talked about now, which is how hard is it to get diagnosed with ADHD? How does it then become a narration for who you are and what you do? And then we'll kind of go off into motherhood and fitness and the things you've done to cope with it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we first diagnosed, how did that feel?
So I was diagnosed about 3 years ago now. It took a long time. So it's pretty late to be diagnosed with something like ADHD in your 30s. It took a long time to identify the symptoms in myself. I think I was highly functioning for a long time. I wasn't the typical person who went to school and was naughty, bouncing off the tables or the walls or having rows. I had good grades, always achieved everything I needed to in school. I wasn't your typical sort of ADHD person. So I think it got overlooked a lot. It's only when I got older and I started to see certain behaviours in myself, and I thought, right, this is not okay. I need to go and see a doctor, have a conversation. Went on a waiting list. As we know, the pressures the NHS are under are huge at the moment. So that took a long time. So being diagnosed in my 30s, well, that's, people would think, right, you've got your diagnosis, now what?
Yeah, so touching on that, I mean, like you said, the side we've covered before is couldn't sit still at school, or, a lot of people, rightly or wrong, it was my superpower. I then went into art and design, and people talk about the navigation as if it literally is a simple case of swapping a football team and away you go. Yours wasn't the typical case. What were some of the symptoms that made you think, there's something different to me here?
I noticed my relationship with food, first of all, that I wasn't hungry. I knew I wasn't hungry, but I felt like I didn't have enough power to stop myself from, going
impulse
and
control.
Impulse control, going in that cupboard, and before you know it, you've eaten 3 chocolate bars and just standing there waiting for the kettle to boil, and then you have your main meal like you would normally in the day or what have you. I just struggled with the whole binge eating. That was the darkest part of it. I didn't understand why I could look at a person and have all these opinions. I would be in Teams meetings and I would literally be thinking, oh, hurry up and just finish, because I need to get in. I need to say what I need to say, because
That impulse to speak.
Yes, impulse to speak. Everything was like impulsive, everything in my life. If I sat and thought about it for too long, I would talk myself out of it. But a lot of the things I've done in my life have always been on impulse. Eating, my job, the snap decisions, just go for it. And that hasn't always brought happiness. So it brought tough times. Gaining weight as a woman is difficult. You've got, if you feel uncomfortable with yourself, you don't want to go out and date other people. You don't want to go and socialize with your friends. When you're going on these holidays with your family, you don't want to be seen in a photo, or, it's those kinds of things. So yeah, it can be a really dark place.
And did you navigate those? Because obviously, growing up, everything starts to form. The things, your nature and nurture comes together in one. You've been in school, you've had these impulse controls, you've gained weight. Was there any point where you actually thought these things aren't normal? Why can't I? Because obviously people may not understand that our impulse controls can be deafening. I know a lot of people go, oh, I'd love to control my temper, but once I lose my temper, I can't control it. People don't realize that crossover from impulse to action can be instant. So at 31, you've sat in this for, a decade or more since your formative years. What made you then think, well, actually, this has to stop, or I have to do something to, help myself?
So there was always that conscious part of my brain that was telling me this is not good behavior. And it's always that good and the bad in your head. And, the bad was very, like I said, impulsive, but that good thought process, the conscious part of your brain is telling you, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep doing this. And it's almost like when people say, I'm going to start my diet on Monday.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
And, Monday comes and then Monday's gone. And before you know it, you're into Wednesday, Thursday, and you haven't started your diet. And then you think, right, Monday's coming again. Let's start on Monday. It's always that, like that conscious circle, consciously going around in your head that this is not okay. You need to break that cycle. And it was that I wanted to be the person I knew I could be, but I just didn't know how I was going to control this impulse to get me there. So it was that I just was so unhappy with how I looked, uncomfortable. I didn't want to socialize. I didn't want to be seen in pictures. I didn't like what I was seeing when I was in a picture. So for me, I didn't want to live the rest of my life in that way. And one of the things that I always knew from a young age, so I can remember as far back as maybe like 4 or 5, I can remember crying every night going to bed, thinking to myself, like, I'm going to die soon. I'm going to die. Like, I had this crazy anxiety about my life is just flashing before my eyes and I'm going to die and I'm not going to achieve something. I'm not going to be where I want to be or who I want to be. So it was that constantly going around in my head that I knew I just needed to make a change. And Maya, my daughter, was just, I needed to do it for her.
And how old was Maya at this point?
Maya would have been maybe like 9.
And how was navigating being obviously a mum with all the, because a lot of people will assume that motherhood is hard enough without body image problems, without being aware that something doesn't sit right with you, with your impulses and things, yet being higher functioning enough to have got this far. It's not like, a lot of people say to me, well, with a lot of higher functioning stage 1 neurodivergence, well, I got this far. I can get that. At what point then did you sit there and think, actually, this is even too much for me?
I knew I wasn't being a good example for her. She was seeing the behaviours, so the binge eating, and I felt like I didn't want her to mirror those behaviours in herself unconsciously. So if you see in a parent, if you're leading, you're meant to be the leader, you're meant to be the example for your children. I didn't want her to see me have this unhealthy relationship with food, be so uncomfortable with myself that I didn't want to go anywhere. That all these behaviours, I didn't want her to see those. So I wanted to change that for her. And that was just it for me. I just needed to get out and I needed to get help and I needed to get that diagnosis to know how to deal with all these symptoms better.
So you're very self-aware. I mean, statistics show that, I think 60-70% of kids who are with parents who have ADHD will become symptomatic of it. If the parent is overweight, they'll become overweight. If the parent is lazy, they'll become lazy because they pick up on that extreme scenario. I've got a lot of clients who will say, well, I keep telling my daughter I'll diet and I don't, and now my daughter seems to be putting on weight. Well, of course, because you're not doing what you say you'll do. So you're very self-aware, which is a lot more than can be said for most. So you've got this in your head. I'm a mother. I'm not leading the life I want to lead. How hard was it to get diagnosed? Because what we hear from a lot of people is, had ADHD, give or take the placebo acts who haven't got it. And getting diagnosed is a lot harder than people think.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrendous. And I sympathise with anyone that hasn't got that diagnosis yet. But what I would say is, if you feel that you fit into one of these ADHD categories, then basically you need to start helping yourself, because the waiting is hard, very, very tough, because in today's society, we can go on to social media and there's so much stuff available where they're saying, oh, these are characteristics of ADHD, these are characteristics of autism, for example. And it's easy for anyone to come along and go, tick, 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 tick. I think I've got this. Yeah. It's so easy to self-diagnose, but there are genuinely people out there struggling, and I can't even explain the level of like darkness for people that really do need the help. And there'll be people on these waiting lists for the NHS, etc., who maybe don't really need as much help. But of course. Either way, the list is the list, and the way in which you went on there is the priority. So it's really tough. And keep on going to the GP, keep on giving them the symptoms. Someone's got to manage those symptoms or help you manage those symptoms, so keep going back. They can change too. So what can look like depression sometimes is something else, anxiety, for example, they are quite closely linked. And when you go in and having treatment for those symptoms with the GP, have that broader conversation. Don't be afraid to have that conversation, because the more you tell them, the more they can understand from your perspective. But that darkness and the waiting is just phenomenal. And the pressure, like I said, for the NHS right now is just, the list is just growing and growing.
Because I think people don't realize how dark ADHD can be in terms of how you form relationships, how you form avoidant principles. So let's talk a little bit about the darker side of what it meant to you, because I think a lot of people do, unfortunately, dress up their own issues with a label. The amount of people I know who think they've got OCD when they have no idea how absolutely debilitating real OCD is. Wanting a clean and tidy house isn't OCD.
No.
OCD is, touching the doorknob 5 times before you leave, having to shuffle shoes to within an inch of their life by the door when anyone comes in, panicking when someone puts a coffee cup down too hard. I mean, I have 2 clients, I did a little bit of research last night, of genuine OCD, and they say they'd rather lose a hand than have it, because they'd rather lose a hand than have it, because it's debilitating. So a lot of people will give it the whole, I was naughty, I can't, the amount of people say to me, Scott, I know I've got ADHD, I can't sit through a film. Yeah, I struggle. So when you're on this list now and you're thinking to yourself, this is a hard time, how are you managing it? Because obviously a lot of people will listen and think, what do I do when I'm on the list? Because I am overweight, I have a hard time forming relationships, I'm not a good role model, and those things sit heavy on you because you have to live with them 24/7. So at that point, being self-aware, what were you doing?
I think, first of all, it's a level of acceptance. You need to accept that you're not the same as everybody else. So in yourself, when we first met, I was in the worst place I could possibly be in my life. I was really down, depressed. I felt lost. And we've had these conversations where I've told you that it's the darkest time of my life. I knew if I didn't go and seek help from people who knew what they were doing, I needed to address the issues I had one at a time. So I had an issue with, one of my biggest ones was the issues with the binge eating and how I looked, how I presented myself. I knew if I got myself together in that respect, I'd feel a little bit more empowered in myself to sort out the other aspects in life.
Of course, yeah.
So it was obviously coming on to plan and having that structure in place. I just literally remember feeling, right, I'm going to have to put the blinkers on here and I'm going to have to concentrate. I need this to work because this is my last chance. And it's not just my last chance, it's Maya's last chance too. So I had to do it for her. And I think it's about looking at the things that you have, put them all out on the table, write them down if you need to. What are the issues that you feel are not going well in your life due to your ADHD or any neurodiversity? And one of them for me, like I said, it was my weight. So it was about addressing that. Address them one at a time, but go to people who are experienced. They know they've got the right information. Don't just go onto social media and just go, oh, I just want a fat loss coach, whatever, or any old one, and just pay, oh, look, it's £20 a month. Let's just go and do that. I knew I needed someone to be on my back. I needed accountability. I needed someone who's going to be there to support me. Someone I could say, like, this is what I'm dealing with, and not going to take, like, any excuse, basically, because we needed to improve my life. So I think it's about, if we go back to your question, it's about identifying what are the priorities in your life issue-wise. So what's the biggest issue for you? Maybe if you feel too intimidated to address that one, go to the second one. Let's do that one first. When things start to feel lighter, you feel more empowered to do other things. So it's really, I would say that would be my piece of advice for people.
And did many people know? I mean, what I hear from a lot of my clients with ADHD is it's so misunderstood that they keep it to themselves, or they fear that it's just an excuse that people give.
I mean, candidly, it's still, to this day, people say to me, like, you haven't got ADHD.
Of course, yeah.
I'm like, okay. But I've learned that other people's opinions don't really matter. But having ADHD, you're likely to overthink. So I just tell myself all the time, right, you're having this thought now about this person doesn't think you've got ADHD. You've got nothing to prove to them. They don't pay your bills. They don't, get you up in the morning. They're not there when, trouble hits, basically. So, it's difficult because people will always question, are you ADHD? Do you have OCD? Do you have this? Do you have that? But you know what? People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Basically, keep yourself to yourself. As long as you're dealing with your own problems, it's nobody else's business at all. I think we need to get better at that, but we also need to get better at supporting everybody. And for me, I could have done two things. I could have been silent about my ADHD because no one would have noticed anyway and just said nothing. But I knew that some of the behaviours I have work on a work day, for example, like I just said about the teams earlier, wanting to answer quickly or not being able to have the patience to wait my turn. Like I didn't want to use it as a way to justify my behaviour, but I wanted people to understand maybe that's why I was doing it.
Yeah, because what you find with a lot of people with ADHD that I've found, and I've got some of my great friends, they zone out of the conversation because they're fixated on saying their part. And then the conversation doesn't really flow because of that. How hard was that for you to then, because obviously some people aren't self-aware. They'll go decades and decades of doing that, or they'll be on the phone and I had a very good friend who would constantly repeat the same conversation every 15 minutes and it would just seamlessly go back to him again. And we started to actually, a lot of us would joke on the phone and be like, does anyone pick up the phone anymore? So obviously that's at his detriment, and he may not have realized to an extent he was doing it as much as he does. So were you in those teams meetings and around social scenarios, relationships with your family, aware that that was an area which, because you can't get away from, it's like food. I do empathize with people who have food problems because you can't get away from it or you're dead. It's like air. If you're allergic to air, people who've got those dust and allergies, it must be impossible. Were you very self-aware then that, even speaking, ADHD was there? Because a lot of people will say a lot of people's issues, they don't really manifest, but you're talking about things that manifest in everything you do.
Oh yeah, it affects every part of your life. And while I am self-aware, there are times where in relationships I've got or in family situations where, if you've got the right people around you, they've got the mechanisms to be able to like bring that up or say, okay, but I didn't ask you that.
Yeah,
I asked you something else. So what is the answer to that?
Yeah.
It's quite a simple question. Yes, no. But I am an over-explainer, in relationships, could be asking a yes, no simple question. But I might say, okay, but my plan is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like, this is why I can't be there at 7 p.m. or whatever. And that might annoy some people. But I think it's about, one of the things about ADHD is informing your family and the people that surround you on how that affects you, essentially.
Massively.
What might affect me might not affect the next person. So it's about a level of understanding how it works for me. And I think the people that I am surrounded by know when I'm having that moment of, okay, she's just having one of those ADHD moments. And they don't say it necessarily, and they try to bring you back on track. But it's about having that acceptance from family and friends and surrounding yourself by the right people.
And communication obviously is key there.
Yeah, 100%. And, I'll be the first person to say, like, my communication isn't the best on times. I don't always blame my ADHD for that. We're human. Everyone's got a different communication style. So, yeah, it's fine to call someone out, but do it in a way where it's constructive and, okay, I didn't ask you that question. I asked you something else. Can you tell me the answer to that, please?
So at what point then is kind of the line between having ADHD and then people, for instance, if like you said, you want to lose weight and, you were very active in doing it, but if you're someone who says they'll do it and doesn't do it, at what point does that frustration boil over to others and how can they deal with it? Because I mean, I've got a lot of friends and family, who've dealt with people with ADHD who have ADHD. And there is a line even I will say where you get frustrated at the lack of acceptance of tasks not being done at the expense of, and we'll talk about dopamine and the various drugs that help. What should someone say to someone with ADHD who maybe is feeling frustrated, who isn't as self-aware?
Okay, this resonates with me because that's still, even though I'm self-aware, that does still happen. So for example, if my day's not going very well, and it could be like a million things, or I might get stuck in meetings back to back and I think, okay, when I have my lunch break, I'm going to do ABC, or I'm going to go to the gym on my lunch break. But unfortunately, a call has come in, which has had to take priority. And then I'm like, I haven't gone to the gym today. I need to now go into the evening. That eats into Maya's time. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm ready to like cry at that point. And it could be just the simplest thing. Like as an outsider looking in, it can look really simple. Like, it's fine, just go to the gym later. Like, it's fine. She's happy doing whatever she's doing. But it's not about that. It's about, as a person with ADHD, it feels like a failure.
Yeah.
So it's, it's about sitting that person down and saying, look, this isn't a failure. Your day hasn't gone to plan. That's the case for most people. You know, it doesn't always go letter by letter or, you know, in order, but that doesn't mean that your day's over and like you haven't done well today. So again, having those support systems in place, if you were losing your cool with a person with ADHD, there's only one way that's going, and that's to an argument. It's going to escalate. If some of the ADHD's behaviours escalate and you escalate with them, that's going like one place. So I would say try to be the calm in someone's storm, bring them back down, ground them, because sometimes you could be like, you feel like you're up here. Like, let's bring it back down. Let's calm down. Let's really look at this situation. I didn't hoover today. You know, it's like, okay, nobody's dying. You know, nobody's life is over because you didn't hoover. But okay, but it was on my list.
So how do we bring someone down then who's got ADHD? Because I hear from 97% of my friends who've got diagnosed ADHD, they find it hard not to argue and then not to really argue and then not to say stupid stuff. What would you say to people who are partners, parents, you know, of people with verified ADHD?
It's quite simple. Don't disregard that simple task that they thought was a big task in their head. It's as simple as that. It is still a big task to them. And just because you don't think it's a big task doesn't mean that's right. For them, it was a big task. Let's just, like I said, take it back, have the conversation, calm the situation down. Okay, you needed to do this. How do we fit it into your day? How do we make sure you achieve that? You don't have a full hour to go to the gym, but you have 45 minutes now that you can go. Could you go now? And help facilitate that a little bit. How do you help facilitate that? Have that conversation, ground them. You know, okay, nobody's hurt, like I said, but how do we get this task done for you?
So what about the negative side to the argumentative destructive ADHD, the avoidance, the aggressive argumentative techniques, which we know a lot of people with ADHD have? How do we either avoid it or how do we make it clear to people with ADHD that because a lot of my male friends with ADHD will say, Jesus, when I go off, I say some ridiculous things and it's not fair on people. What would you say? Because obviously there's a point with everything, neurodiversity and the like, where bad behavior is bad behavior. How much harder is it someone who obviously doesn't hold dopamine that well, has bad impulse control? What are kind of the signs and symptoms to look out for? Because obviously people will say, God, I trigger my partner so much. And obviously there is the side where some people aren't right for some people. But what would you say as someone who's had that darker side where you get overstimulated and then, you know, things blow up? What would you say to someone on the opposite side that has to deal with that?
It's understanding what are the partner's triggers, first of all. It could be that task list. It could be how you're behaving, for example. Sometimes it's about respect as well. You feel like disrespected. So for the other person, I would probably say, take a step back, remove yourself. I understand that this is going to escalate into an argument, but what you need to do is tell that other person, the person that's neurodiverse or ADHD, listen, I understand we're not agreeing right now, but I need to remove myself because I don't want this to escalate. I'm going to give you space for you to have time, but I will come back and we'll have this conversation later.
So one of the take-homes there is to date someone with ADHD, you have to have a lot of patience or be self-aware. Because what I find, and again, none of us are perfect, but I do find some people are just not best suited to date people with neurodiversities because it can be two-footed. You know, the person with ADHD may not be able to be self-aware enough to know when they say hurtful things, and the partner may be too sensitive to deal with that. Yeah. So has this affected you? What would you say, you know, without passing blame from one partner to another? How hard has it been to date with ADHD?
Well,
and that's pre-medication, post-medication. Yeah. And is there any difference? Because people will want to know.
It's absolutely a huge difference. So we'll get onto the drug without side. Medication, and prior to my diagnosis, I probably was not even that self-aware.
Okay, wow.
In relationships, I'm talking. I'm aware of the signs and symptoms, you know, but in relationships, I would be savage, like cutthroat. If I can hurt you a little bit more, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, you hear it a lot, yeah.
Right? So that was me. as I obviously grew older, more understanding of my signs and symptoms, my triggers, etc., and going on to the medication, that wasn't always great either. And I know we want to talk about that later, but, you know, one medication didn't really work for me. It turned me into, you know, I was absolutely not okay. I was more sensitive than usual. I was more triggered than usual. And that's hard to see in yourself in relationships.
Well, especially because a lot of people assume, I know a lot of people say, I can't wait to be medicated.
No.
And I say to them, it's not always that easy. And do you remember which medication that was?
That was methylphenidate.
Methylphenidate, yeah.
So it didn't sit well with me. I just wasn't myself. Even like my friends and family were saying like, you're not okay, like you're just so different. And I thought I was better because placebo of taking the medication, I'm better now, I'm taking this drug, I'm so much better.
People do think it's an instant, you know.
It's not.
Yeah.
And every week I went back and it was increased every time. Every time I went back. It was
and how with it, without, I find myself unable sometimes to paint a good side to GPs these days. And I know a lot. And even they admit they're underprepared, undereducated, and they don't have the funding for it. But when you go back and you say to a GP, how you started me on meth, shorten it, and I'm on 10 milligrams, I don't know what milligrams you're on, and it's up to 20, it's up to 40, and things are getting worse. What was coming back? Was it, right, maybe let's try something different? Or is it, which I fear may have been a case I hear, which is go away, come back in 8 weeks' time?
Yeah, it wasn't even my GP actually. So I was being seen by a community mental health team locally, and the staff there are brilliant. And obviously the message was, let's just keep trying. Like, it's early days. This is new medication. Let's, you know, keep trying. Let's get it in the system. Let's get it sort of titrated so it's settled in your system and see how we go. We can't just, this is not working for me.
Yeah.
You know, and I get that. That's fine. And I you know, I was aware, and I've worked in health. So I was like, okay, I have all faith in you. And that continued. But of course, they're not at home. They're not at work.
So I was about to say there are consequences to everything that doesn't involve them in terms of, I say to people a lot, when you're medicated, that will interfere with how you hold the relationship up there, your impulse control, how much you hold dopamine, whether you're happy or sad on a day. And certain people tell me, well, I went onto this drug and it actually made my happier moments worse. So I was actually in a worse state because of it. And that made me feel even more lost and more people who are lost make worse choices. And that the cycle is in theory continuing in a worse way. So how did that feel? You're on medication. When did it start to change? When were the cogs starting to turn in a positive way?
Look, my relationship at the time took a massive decline. And, you know, we have a relationship, as you know, strong enough, you know, that the background to that. So I could see certain things that were happening and they weren't related just to my medication. So basically the way in which the behaviours that were returned to me from the other person, basically there was a lack of acceptance, a lack of room for my understanding how I was and understanding that, okay, this was her prior to medication. This is her on this medication. And it was a conversation of, this medication's not for you. But I felt like it came from a place of like denial from their part. Like they didn't want me to be on this medication. So I was like a bit like, what? What are you even saying? I'm on medication. I'm better. I'm a way better person. You know, but it did take that sort of like penny being put in and then finally dropping and being like, okay, maybe there is something here. And then coming off that medication, I literally stopped, which is not really advisable when you're on like one of the highest doses of methylphenidate. You know, I would suggest going to back to your clinician and them advising you what to do. Don't just stop it.
But there must have been a level of distrust with the drug and also frustration, because to stop something dead on, unless it is with trusted advisors and it's in the sense of you're weaning off something that's actually now becoming positive. At what point did you kind of think, Jesus, am I gonna get better?
It was at that point. So when I stopped that drug, I was like, is there any hope for me? Is there?
Did you always hear, and this is why I wanted to do this with you, 9 times that people go, got ADHD, went down, I got Elvance, 10 milligrams, and I was fine. ADHD task lists were done, turned into Catwoman.
Yeah, and I want that.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, where's that for me? Because I was at that point thinking, Right, but this was supposed to be like the thing that changed everything for me, and I get focus back. I'd be, be able to be motivated.
Limitless, the movie.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you're still a mum at this point, and you're
yeah,
trying to hold down a relationship and everything.
yeah.
And I think, you know, when we started to work together, it was obvious you really wanted some kind of symptomatic relief. You really
I was
wanted to
desperate.
change. Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
other word for it. It was desperation.
And I think people don't realize that ADHD and the lack of improvement, there's a high. One thing I wanted to touch on for 2 seconds is the misconception that the male suicide rate is actually higher because males have a worse suicide level. Women actually try to commit suicide 4 times more, and they start 3 years earlier. And I'm not saying that male suicide isn't something we should be very aware of. It's just that males commit suicide through more lethal means. They jump in front of buses, jump off bridges, use guns. ADHD actually, and the lack of resolve with medication, actually has one of the highest rates of attempted suicide. Because people don't hold on to dopamine long enough. So, and you've put it out there for social media. I think it's very important. You've gone through the suicide matrix. At what point then did you feel like, right, I have to start doing things for myself, with my body, with my health, with my fitness, because these drugs may not do and may not be the be all and end all?
I mean, when I came on to plan, I was already on plan before the medications kicked in. So I already had that structure there. And I think what can get really addictive about being on plan is seeing that change in your body. And I think I was really in denial, if you remember going back. Like, I would say to you, oh, Scott, look, I know I've lost like a stone now, but I don't really look very like any different, do I? I can remember you like replying back like, Kiss, are you for real? Like, look at the difference.
Yeah,
Put them side to side.
You didn't hold that dopamine very long.
I couldn't see.
It literally was like, that's gone now. I haven't changed.
Next.
Yeah,
next.
yeah.
Thanks, next. That kind of way of thinking. But then coming onto the medication, I wanted it to sort of help me structure my fitness more. And it would be completely wrong of me to sit here and say, even now on different medications, I'm on Elvance now.
Yeah.
But even on medication, it's still tough, because what the medication does for me right now is bring that my energy down. So a lot of the time I'm struggling. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I could have like 12 hours sleep, and you think, oh, this is brilliant. You've had 12 hours sleep. You take that medication and then motivation's gone. But why? That shouldn't do that, surely. Yeah. I'm like, I'm fighting with myself, constantly having these conversations as to like, let's go to the gym. Right, but you've got 10 other things you need to do. And Maya needs this, and this for like tonight, for football, for, netball, or she needs to be somewhere else. It's really hard. And there were times that, when we met, it was the darkest time of my life. That was the contemplation. I've been open. I have said it on social media many times. Would I have ever done that to affect Maya? No, but I couldn't see a way out. I thought she would be better without me.
No, but I think people disregard the feeling for the action. And I know, obviously, we lost Ricky Hatton last week to suicide. And I say to a lot of people I know who have, I'll be careful to phrase it, in their opinion, fortunately, come through the actual act of trying to take the life of, said, actually sitting in the thought of suicide for years was worse than trying and coming through that small period, because it's like living in a perpetual cycle where you don't see an end.
Yes.
And I can't empathize with people for that, but I hear it thousands of times through my career. How hard was it then? Because I think a lot of people never hear this whole last 10 minutes of, actually got help, got medication, started something on my own. It didn't work. Then I got something like Elvance, which is one of the strongest that they can prescribe now. And I think it's the one that they've nearly run out of now. And it's actually making me feel more lethargic. Where do you go with the bit that I want to talk about next, which is the self-manifestation? Where do you start to think, actually, I've got to do a lot of this myself now? And obviously, how much did you lose? You'd lost, what, 3 stone, 2.5 stone? Yeah. That's amazing for people without ADHD, without the struggle of having low impulse control, inability to hold on to dopamine. Because a lot of people say, I kind of realized ADHD when I won the lottery, and next day I felt sad again. I did, because you don't hold that dopamine. Something that means a lot to you one day, you're searching for the next thing. How did you then structure? Because we always used to speak, and you've spoken on Reels, and you can find Kirsty, her ADHD journey on all my socials. At what point were you starting to lose weight and you were thinking, well, actually, I can do a lot of this myself?
I question whether I can do it myself. I would be a really bad liar if I sat here and said, hi, I can do this by myself, don't need you anymore. Like, you've given me the tools. I understand what I need to do. But for me, accountability is everything. Like, and having the support system there to say, I'm never, ever once checked in and said to you, oh, but I was perfect this week and I didn't lose anything, Scott. So I don't know what's wrong with plan. Like, there was never ever the conversation. It was, Scott, I've had this, and this week. And whilst I've tried to get myself to the gym, I've missed a few sessions and therefore my loss is not as great this week. Never justifying the behavior, but always saying to you, look, this is what my week has looked like, for you to understand why maybe the loss hasn't come in as great as it should. And then you to be able to then change what you need to change for me. So sitting here, I would be really bad, and I would be a really, really bad liar if I said I can do it all by myself. I don't think I can. I need that accountability. I've identified that. So if I didn't have accountability from you, for example, I don't think I could continue to do these things. You know, I've gone out, there's been weeks, hasn't there, and months that I've gone and I've lived my life and, you know, settled down into a sort of more of a routine. But I always come back and I say to you,
the things never slide. And I think that's one thing that I want people to know, that what you're suggesting is, and I believe people with ADHD, when it comes to health and fitness, need, and I'm going to say, a coach. The ability to handle someone's chaos is vital. And I'll call it chaos because a lot of people won't be able to empathize with how ADHD brains work. But you never went away and shit the bed.
No.
You held on to habits. You held on to self-awareness. When did that start to come? Because a lot of people have seen a lot of my clients over the years who've come on and had ADHD. Alana will be an after. And they have held on to it. And a lot of people message me, and I get it dozens of times a month. Hi, Scott, get ADHD, so I probably can't lose weight. And if I do lose weight, it won't stay off. And I say, that's not true. You're looking at an outcome you haven't tried yet, and you don't realize how actually the good side of ADHD is once you do find, because I mean, Alana, when she diets, ruthless.
Oh, yeah.
Her ADHD is
She's
without doubt a superpower there.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to paint the doom and gloom side first, because I believe that a lot of people don't have anyone to actually go, it's fucking rough.
It is rough.
And the meds may not work straight away. And even the best meds may make you feel worse in certain respects. I think some people, like you're saying about Elvance, they go, oh my God, I'll be like Bradley Cooper off film Limitless. I will be super intelligent. I'll learn Spanish in 3 days and I'll lose weight. And I say to people, depending on the feedback, you may improve some parts of your life and others may suck. But once you didn't start to suck, at what point did you start thinking, well, actually, these are things I understand now, and look at you now, you know, I've kept weight off, so I can. Was there a crossover, or was it 50% drug, 50% you, or was it things where you went, actually, the clarity, because I'm all for antidepressants, to use an example, when they help you get through a period where you can't anchor anything that will carry you on. For instance, I suck at my job, I suck at my relationship, I suck at weight loss because I'm clinically depressed.
Yeah.
I've taken anything, and I've lost a bit of weight, and my job's improving, and my relationship's getting better. Actually, I am happy enough to see I can do it. Then you will at some point better wean yourself off, and those things will snowball. The inability to have anything good happen means that you are stuck and you need a drug. And people think I'm anti-antidepressant. I'm actually not. I've had family members say to me, I won't do it. And I'm like, no, you should, until you anchor yourself to enough positive change that becomes the crutch, not the drug. So you've taken Elvance, you're at these stages. Do you feel your life's completely better, or do you feel it's worse? Or what would you tell people with the pros of this now?
Listen, I think the pros of it are, one thing I've learned is that one of my best skills is resilience, like through everything. And like you said, you want to take that magic pill and be invincible and have all this energy and do, you know, your to-do list in rapid time and, you know, make the most of your day. I think the pros of it are that the last, I would say, especially the last 5 years have been a challenge. So they've allowed me to see what my real strengths are without the medication. And then with medication, that the pros there are, medication is not always the answer. And whilst it may work for some people, it may not for others, and in different ways with both of those. I think the pros as well are that like you said, not letting everything slide. I am self-aware. I was in such a bad place those few years ago, and I never want to get there again. So one of the biggest things for me is not the medication. It's about the journey that I've had and the experience I've had, learning about myself, learning the tools, and they're always in the back of my mind now. I don't want to go back.
So what are some of the tools you built up? Because what a lot of people will want to know is, like business, like raising kids, what are the lessons you learn, and which ones do you say, well, actually, that has been a major, like for instance, self-image, has being fitter, losing weight, been something which anchors you to a way more positive change? Because a lot of people who I know, they'll take a drug or a medication, and I'll say, what have you actually changed? You know, Miss Buddy,
Yeah.
what have you done for yourself? Otherwise, you're in the same position than just a drug taker.
I've proven to myself that I can, if I put my mind to it, without medication, bearing in mind that for a long time, and when I initially did the plan, I wasn't medicated.
Yeah.
I lost 3 stone. And that was because I was dedicated to myself, and I knew that I needed to get somewhere mentally that wasn't the place where I started. So I think that's a big part of it. You need to reflect back, look at it and think, wow, you can do it yourself. If you really put your mind to something and you want it. I always say this, I've said it for years on social media, since we've worked together, you have to want it. You have to want it. If you don't want it enough, you're going to make excuses. You're going to fall off. Are you willing to give up alcohol? Are you willing to, maybe not go to social events because they always seem to be around eating? Why do social events have to be around eating? And, always the Christmas time, I always say it, at the end of the aisle, they've always got those, this chocolate, that chocolate. Like, let's go to Tesco's and just put everything because it's Christmas. Let's put it all in. Like the lessons and the tools I've learned, I'm like, nah, I don't even have that in the house now. There's no point. Because that, looking at, for example, I know looking at those, chocolates or whatever is your nemesis, basically food-wise, is basically a trigger for me. So that was without medication. That was, being on plan.
So there is a certain amount of discipline that goes with this. I think a lot of people I meet, I say to them, stop looking for the drug to give you discipline. That is there anyway. The drugs will help.
Yeah, the drugs only suppress sort of, I wouldn't even say a lot of people are looking for drug suppression for their appetite.
Yeah.
For appetite suppressant. I don't get that. Because my binge eating didn't come from a fact that I was always feeling hungry. It was the boredom or the monotony of the day, and my brain's like, oh, next bit of dopamine, let's go in the cupboard. Let's have a bit of sugar. Let's go for it. It was always about that. So for me, it's having that self-control. I've identified that if I put my mind to something, I have the ability to control my brain. I don't need medication just for that. But the medication's there to maybe quieten the overthinking or sort of help me not be as, come in on a conversation and butt in or, wait my turn a little bit. It's those things for me that the medication are now doing, not necessarily taking away that appetite or all the bad behaviours. And it's allowing me then that more space in my head to be able to maybe control that impulse a little bit that maybe I couldn't do before because I had 1,000,001 things in my head.
So how has the medication been now for you? What medication are you on? What milligrams? And one thing I think you touched upon there is the fact that a lot of people will take a medication and still be stuck in the what now. You're a very action woman. You're good at pulling the trigger, doing things you say you'll do, changing careers, losing weight. So how has the medication affected you, and what positives did you take from it?
So at the moment, it's only recently that I've started the Elvance. So I think I'm only on maybe 20 milligrams at the moment. So it's still quite a lighter dose than some people are on.
I tried it. It's wild stuff.
Oh.
I will admit, yeah. I like to try nootropics and everyone knows in the corner. So I tried, I think 10 milligrams and I've taken modafinil and different things. It, for me, because obviously I don't have a problem with holding dopamine, it made me, I couldn't sit down. I couldn't focus on work. I felt like I just wanted to walk around the house, talk a lot. It actually made me infinitely less able to focus.
Yeah.
So when people think, oh my God, it's just going to make you like Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, you'll start to count cards and, like I said, Mandarin, I can definitely understand how it might be an explosion of things you don't want to happen. So,
Yeah.
so 20 milligrams of Elvance,
Yeah.
and then what happened after that?
So that's what I'm on currently. I don't know. When you go for these appointments and they say, "How is it working for you?" and I'm like, "Well, I haven't got pain." So when you've got pain, you take a paracetamol, the pain goes away. So, do you want to tell me how that how it's affecting me?
Do others chime in? Do people tell you, because one thing I ask everyone, and people listening will know because people I know have it. I'll say, what has changed then? Because if you're going to take a steroid, I want to see some muscle. If you're going to take an ADHD drug and you've not lost weight, I want to see you losing weight. For me, there's no point taking something if it's not working.
Not working, yeah.
So what have people said to you? Because Maya, mum, dad, friends, colleagues.
Yeah, they, like I said earlier, like the methylphenidate, they were adamant, like this is making you worse, basically. It's affecting your ADHD, just not very nice to be around. And, so going on to this medication, I think I was really pessimistic about the medication, changing it, going on to a new one. I genuinely was worried about telling people that I was changing medication because I didn't want to give them a platform to say, change your medication, still not working for you. So for me, I've kept it quite tight. So I've basically gone on to this medication and I haven't broadcast it to my family. I just get on with my ADHD now and my appointments and I keep myself to myself because it's easier. The support is there if I need it. Of course, if my behaviors were out of control, they would rein me in. But I keep a lot of it internalized because I'm worried that they're going to say a behavior is because of the ADHD or because of the medication.
Is that lonely?
Yeah.
Must be hard. Because I think one of the things we talk about all the time on these podcasts is communication. And then sometimes it's the actual need to suppress the communication because of how that'll be encoded by someone else, decoded by someone else.
Yeah. But, just the same way as you just said, like if you took it, what it does to you, I've taken it today.
Yeah. And that's why I tell people, I'm like, no drug and its interactions will be the same. No one's ADHD is the same. No. That's why I have I try not to huge arguments online about cancer because it's not cancer, it's cancers. There's 200 types, 200 cells, and everyone's one cancer is genetic to them. What someone's lung cancer might be different compared to how many ibuprofen you took in your life, how much did you drink, what's your constitution like, what's your DNA like. So you're saying that now this Elvance, it's a perception now for you. It's how do people, because I think a lot of people will be watching this and assuming that they want to take a medication that makes them feel like they are conquering ADHD. And what you're saying is actually, you might not even know. It might be how others perceive you, and that might be the win.
Yeah. It's about how does that look from the outside, and how, is that helping me look better? Because
do you feel it is?
I don't know. At this point, it's very new.
Something else people don't ever talk about is, people will go, I popped the medication and they'll wait for, it's like, December the 1st, Christmas decoration lights when we know it's there. You're saying, I don't know if it's working.
I don't know. I would be, and like I said, one thing I can't do is I'm always really candid in what I say. I'm really open. I've always been open on social media. Anytime we've had a conversation, I'm really open about everything. I don't know if that's working for me. It's early days. Am I more focused? A little bit, maybe. But other than that, I can't really tell you.
Is there anything you can feel? Because I think a lot of people, it's like if you're full, no one knows but the people around you.
Yeah.
Do you have any inkling of things that have improved at all? Because like I said, people tell me, can't wait to go on ADHD meds. And I'm like, not pissing on your kids at Christmas, but a lot of people tell me that's not how it'll work. And I don't want you to become disillusioned. It's not a tablet of ecstasy. You won't suddenly bounce off the walls if you weren't bouncing off the walls.
No, it's really hard because it's about, again, it's self-reflection, looking at yourself, being self-aware. And if I was to look at myself and the behaviours since Elvance, probably a little bit more self-control around food. Like I'm not having that sort of, I nearly went in the drawer then.
The next dopamine.
It's that, for that next sort of dopamine hit. And I think that's all I could really point out at this moment in time. But I am reliant on the good support system I have around me to say, that's not normal behaviour for you, stop.
Do you feel like a lot of the behaviours over the God, it must be 4 or 5 years now we've known each other. Do you feel like a lot of the things you've been able to improve upon have been you as opposed to medication?
Yeah, 100%.
Because I would strongly say that in the periods you've told me you're on medication, off medication, that a lot of the things, the way you look, the way you hold yourself, is the bit that I want to really stress. With everything aside from stage 3 autism and things like that, you can help yourself a shed ton more than you think.
100%. If you literally sit in the house, right, and you don't brush your hair, brush your teeth, get up, have a shower, if you just sit there and you're like, oh, okay.
Feel judged.
Sorry about that. If you just sit there, then you're not going to feel better about yourself. Essentially, if you're getting up and making your bed, I think there's scientific evidence for that as well. Making your bed, getting yourself ready and looking after yourself, your basic needs at the very least, you're already in a better predicament than you were. If you're sitting there, you're not going to motivate yourself when you look in the mirror. You're just going to feel worse.
Yeah, neurologically, the drive phase in your brain for actually accepting and completing tasks is massive.
Yeah.
And this is why people ridicule me when I see the little posts of, tick boxes. It has changed more people's lives ticking boxes than any Navy SEAL, make your bed in the morning speech will ever do, because it's true. So I tell people to write things down you've done in the day and prove to your brain, because people don't realize that your conscious and subconscious are radically different. 80% of what you do is subconscious. And you think the conscious part of you going, I did that, write it down, look at the end of the day and go, wow, I am so much better.
Yeah. Be 1% better than
Be
you were
1%
yesterday.
better, yeah. And I don't think people realize that every gym session you do, you cannot tell what that did. It's probably 6 months down the line when cumulatively they add up. You know, it's not like a business where you'll suddenly sell a Bitcoin the next day for 10% more.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that all the success stories like you are years of 1%.
Yeah. And it isn't just eating right and going to the gym, it's the mental work that you're putting in as well. And, you know, even when we were on plan, doing those 3 things that we were grateful for every day before going, I always did it before I went to bed, and having that as a habit, that's something that when I go to bed, I think I'm really grateful for. And I tell myself, like, what was good about the day, you know, try and like pick them out of those good things. You know, I've mentioned to you, I've had a horrendous week, but, you know, there are these other good things. So I think it's about, when life's throwing challenges, stand back, take a deep breath and look for the good things. Because although these challenges are there, we can prove how strong we are and resilient we are. And I think take them as the opportunity to grow and improve yourself. And don't sit there and feel like a failure, because there's always positives in everything. There's things happen for a reason a lot of the time. And I just think that, you know, we have to look for the positives and not focus on those negatives all the time.
And how does it affect your working life? Because people will rightly so want to hear this last 20 minutes about relationships and self-journey, losing weight and things. Obviously, it is a fitness brand.
Yeah.
How has it affected work? Because a lot of people say they struggle to find careers. I mean, without going through my whole journey, I struggled a lot in university to even think of careers because of my dyslexia, because later on my ASD diagnosis, I was lucky enough to be around people who literally maybe knew, but kind of almost forced me into boxes. Be self-employed, trust me. I remember my dad saying, you'll never work for anyone. Regardless of whether he knew or not, or was smart enough not to label, he just went, you will never ever be able to, I can't even work with people, let alone for people. So, you know, does it affect your job now, and has it improved?
It does affect my job.
Yeah.
You know, again, I always am mindful of that filter. I have to put that filter on. When you're self-employed and you've got an opinion, no one's really gonna, you know, give you the sack for, gonna give you the sack for basically saying, whatever your opinion is. Whereas if I really said what I was thinking half the time in my job, I would have already been shipped out.
Do you struggle? Because impulse control is massive.
Yeah, it's huge. It's a huge thing. So it does affect your career. You know, you've got to be mindful. And there's a lot of frustration in that because you can't get your voice or your point across. So it's hard. It's tough. It's tough on a daily basis. You have to make those choices about picking your battles, because if I just said what I was thinking half the time, I just wouldn't be employed by anyone.
And does the medication help? And have you noticed the difference?
It does help. It does help in selecting what the best way to put something across. So in getting the message across that I'm trying to get. Whereas before I would probably be a bit more straight and being like, why are you not doing something? So you're the person that's meant to be running this team. Why are you not doing something? Why am I doing everything?
And did that in itself frustrate you to have those thoughts and not being able to externally say them?
Yeah.
Because from a lot of my clients tell me, they're like, God, I sit there and I just boil every day.
Yeah.
Whereas I wouldn't, for instance, you go, oh, I'm not the boss. I can't do what the bosses do. I accept it, move on. You're saying that literally you're ready to explode and verbalize all this.
So many times a day where I have to rein myself in. And I think that's partly where the medication slides in a little bit now. But a lot of those behaviors are also me too, because I've learned the tools and the times to say something when it's appropriate, when it's not. You know, I am a very opinionated person. I do have opinions. I like
the Welsh in you.
Yeah,
it is
fiery
as a nation.
Yeah, well, it's a dragon on the flag.
100%. Yeah.
You know, so you know, I do like to get my point across, and even if sometimes we disagree, you know, if you say something and I say to you, well, I don't see it like that. It's about how I'm now putting it across. Whereas before I may have been like, Scott, like, no, it's not that. And I would have argued black and blue with you. There's more mature answer coming and a more intellectual answer rather than I'll tell you why you're wrong and I'll sit here all day and argue with you, you know.
So again, that's your, which I want to stress, you didn't want to mention really that was the drug. You've just said you have learned to, you have worked on. And would you say as a mother, because obviously I'm the first person, you know, I've now got an 18-month-old. I thought things that I would be a lot more volatile with, I've learned over the years with adults to be more accepting of. You know, I remember when my daughter was growing up, I probably even then at 28 couldn't conceptualize why they can't understand no. Now when Fox destroys things, I literally go, oh, there you go, buddy, and you clean up. Whereas before I'd have been more frustrated, but now I know from doing internal work that there's no chance on earth he understands what the hell is going on, and that's just fun. But I see people out in public berate 2-year-olds.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you understand? They don't at all in any way unequivocally understand what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
You're in the wrong because you're the adult. So has that helped you with Maya, with family? Because some people tell me that they find work seems to anchor them to being a bit more shh. But when you're at home, we all know, we say things to friends and family we would never say in work environments because the filter is off. How has that been?
If I could take back, Maya is nearly 13 now. If I could take back and go back to her when she was in her younger days, I would have. And I'd love to, because I would be a different parent to what I was.
Killed my last question.
Sorry.
We'll do it now. What would you tell a younger Kirsty who has ADHD, for all the young girls and boys out there who have ADHD, who are 18, 25, can't wait till they're 31, don't know yet, but have been told, you know, you just started to say then you take back half what would you tell her to take back?
I would just tell her to have some patience, step away, take a breath, because not everything is as bad as it seems. If I could do it again with my time over again, I wouldn't necessarily change anything. I'd change how I dealt with certain situations. Whereas now, as I've got older, I think that's a maturity thing, and going through life, some of the life experiences that I've had, you know, could probably write a book. And I think I would stand back and just take a breath and just allow her the space to be more herself, because I think a lot of the time she's been a bit like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Like, because my behavior perhaps is I've always escalated really quickly because of the ADHD. Whereas now I think there's more of a platform for a conversation. She's my best friend. You know, there's not a day that goes by that, you know, even now she will run up to me and like be like, kiss mum, and like we'll have a little kiss and be like, oh, okay, bye, see you later. She gets out of the car in the morning. We're so tight, and I'm so proud of that relationship. But it has had its bumps from being a single parent, needing to provide, you know, keep a roof over her head. You know, ADHD by itself is hard, but then you're adding in being a single parent, being the provider, being an independent woman. You know, it's tough. But I would just tell my younger self, don't worry, you've got this, believe in yourself. And whilst the road's not going to be perfect and there's going to be bumps on the way, you're just going to be fine and you'll find your way. And because it doesn't look like a conventional life that people portray on social media, that's fine too.
And this is something I do struggle with a lot, because obviously I coach people who've got lots of different backstories, and you only ever see the got ADHD, got medicated, and again, I've got all these superpowers. And I sometimes look and I think, Jesus, I know the truth behind it. Not saying there aren't people who don't have the best scenario, but in my opinion, of God, must be 500 people with really clinically, genuinely, and Alana will tell you, we've done podcasts on it. It's much harder. But what I do find is, with a lot of people with ADHD, is once they settle into their habits, like you've kept the weight off. You've kept 90% of the habits. The way you converse is different. Do you think that comes in maturity, or is it something you have to really work on? Because I think, again, to say the same thing over and over again, I think people think I'll take a drug and it will be done.
That isn't the answer. Taking the drug isn't the answer. You have to grow in yourself. You have to try. You have to want to change yourself. If you don't like behaviors you have, it's on you to change them. It's not on your partner. It's not on your brother, your sister, your mother, anyone. It's not on those people. It's on you. It's about how you deal with them. How do you then create those good habits moving forward to try and prevent those bad habits creeping in? How do you run your life on a day-to-day basis? Not every day is a great day. You might get up and you might have a really bad day today, but that doesn't mean tomorrow has to be bad too. But you just have to have the tools and the ability to say to yourself, this is my behavior. I don't like it. I don't like the way that's coming across to other people, and I want to change it.
And do you have things in place for the bad days?
Yeah. So sometimes, like I said, sometimes days I don't want to go to the gym because I might be feeling, I needed to put the Hoover over, or there's a meeting that's run over. But I tell myself, you do not want to go, but you need to go. You will feel better after it.
Yeah.
It's about talking to yourself. I know it sounds absolutely crazy sitting there saying, talk to yourself.
No,
but
I think
it's about having a conversation with yourself, because what you're putting in and investing in yourself will come back in dividends later.
No, I think if you look at some of the best businessmen, athletes in the world, they stand in the mirror and talk to themselves. I think the problem is people say talking to yourself is crazy, but look at the internal talks everyone has. I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm useless,
100%.
I can't do it, I'm lost, I need to not be here. People think the saying it is the crazy part, but the internal dialogue we have is the crazy part. I say to people all the time, what you eat and what you listen to isn't the real diet battle. The diet is what you ingest mentally to yourself. Everything starts internally.
But that's ignorance to their own
of course.
Internal mind. So until you accept that the conversation that's going around in your head isn't crazy, you just need to, get all those thoughts down on paper. What is it that are the issues? How do you stop this internal dialogue? How do you stop all this worry? How is that? How does that look? How does it affect you on a day-to-day basis? Take accountability. Because no one's going to walk in here and save me. There's no knight on a white horse or whatever going to come and save me. I wish there was, in the form of medication. That isn't the case. It only helps us live, or helps us, be a little bit more subdued in, erratic behavior or impulse control in my story. So nobody's coming to save you. You need to save yourself.
And are there any resources people can reach out to? Is there anything that's helped you, apart from, obviously, people know, and you can see videos of Kirsty on my highlights about how the plan has helped with her ADHD. But is there anything you've gone to, or places you've got your ADHD journey channel, obviously, where you talk about your own struggles, which I think is great for anyone, male or female. But is there anywhere you've gone, or any books you've read, or has it been very much live in it?
I think my advice would be to live it, because when you're reading someone else's experience, you can kind of go, oh yeah, that's my life. But in actual fact, it's not yours.
Yeah.
Everyone's experience is different. So live your life. You have the tools, you have the ability, but you need to just take that accountability. And I would say surround yourself with the right people. If you're surrounding yourself with toxic people that don't have the same kind of, mindset, if you're surrounding yourself, if you're that person in the, sitting there and on the sofa not doing anything, and you're surrounding yourself with those people, you're not going anywhere. So surround yourself with positive people, the people that will identify when you're not so good, the people who will pick up the phone and have that conversation with you, support you. One of the things I always chime on about is the work that I've done with Samaritans. They were always good. If you are feeling like you're in a really bad place, give them a call. They're always there to have a chat, and it's a free phone number. You can't really go wrong there, and that's a starting point, really. So yeah, I think that's just would be my advice, is just to look at your own life. Don't always think that everything that comes in books or scientifically proven can apply to everybody, because it doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people, they, like I said about drugs, they watch a podcast or they read a book and they think that's it then. That'll be me,
Yeah,
without having
done.
to do the work behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything you'd like to leave people with that they may not know or they may be confused about with ADHD? Because what I like to end things on is something that people don't know.
Yeah, so ADHD, whilst there's so much evidence out there of this is how ADHD should look, it's never one size fits all. So just remember that everyone experiences it differently. If you do have a friend with ADHD or a family member, it's really important to know that some of the behaviors that they have is not intentional. It can be classed as a disability, non-visible disability. And just remember that not every day is a good day. And just because, their disability is different or you can't physically see it, that can be a struggle in itself, in acceptance. And I would say that I would encourage anyone that's having, ADHD symptoms to really sit and work out for themselves what their issues are, what the negatives are in their lives, to really start helping themselves. If you can help yourself, a little bit while you're waiting to be diagnosed, while you're waiting to see a healthcare professional to get that diagnosis, then you're already on the right path to making yourself feel better and understanding why your ADHD affects you. But everyone's ADHD is different, and what works for some may not work for others. So it's about learning yourself.
And I think that's one of the overriding messages to everything is no one's weight loss journey is the same. No one's ADHD is the same. And if you're not prepared to do the work internally to find out what is your why and what is your reason to change, I think everyone is just even more confused, and the topic is confusing enough as it is.
Yeah, it's a really hard topic, and it is a sensitive topic. And just be mindful when you are having conversations with people that have ADHD, may have ADHD, or any other neurodiversity. Just be sensitive with them, because you don't know, if you're a neurotypical person, you don't know what they're going through on that day. Let's just be kind, be nice to each other, support each other, and be there for each other. It's just simple as that.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.